Afternoon, everyone. I think lunch is settled in. I think this is the one group that I can say data in the afternoon is probably not going to put you to sleep. My name is Paul Mateo. I'm Vice President for Analytical Services with Grenzebach Lear & Associates, based out of Chicago. I want to thank everyone in this room, as well as UW and the Drive Conference organizers for having me speak with you this afternoon. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about what I believe is one of the most important processes in fundraising, and that is prospect portfolio management. In our organizations, fundraisers are essentially being asked to basically make a tremendous amount of impact with very little resources. We've seen organizations across the country that may spend 11 cents on the dollar to raise funds, and I think that's pretty amazing. That's obviously one of the most efficient businesses out there. And so you might be a very large organization with a very complex prospect management process, and you have specific challenges, or you might be a very small organization or an organization that needs to jumpstart the prospect and portfolio management process at your respective institutions. And I hope today's session will spark some ideas and help you do that. Just a little bit about GGNA. We're a global fundraising management consultancy. We have offices in both Chicago and in London. We serve many clients. I think many of you are in this room. But out of the 61 billion-dollar campaigns that have been recently completed or in progress, we're actually consultants to 30 of those, more than 30 of those. And at least 52 of them have been clients of ours in some capacity, whether it be specialized consulting in advancement services, in communications, research, prospect management, et cetera. I belong to the analytics division. We're responsible for providing critical data to our clients and in support of our consultants. That'll be in the form of visualization of data, research, as I mentioned, prospect management. And we also find this to be sort of our core competency among our clients. Every piece of advice, recommendation, counsel that we provide is based, we think, must be based in hard evidence and hard research, and that's where our division comes in. Also, full disclosure, we also have a prospect screening product called DonorScape that we started back in 1986. We've since refined it over the years. In 2004, we launched our first web-based system, completely web-based, called DonorScape, and just last Friday we launched a very new version of DonorScape, kind of re-engineering all of the components there. So the premise for my session today, one, development budgets are essentially static, if not shrinking. So we're being asked essentially to do more with less. Tons of pressure to sustain the same level of fundraising as the prior years. In many cases, it might just be a matter of efficiency, getting our gift officers and all of our resources around the organization, around that common goal, and getting them to do more. In other cases, it might be a gross inefficiency in the organization, and there is no structure for portfolio management or sustaining a major gift pipeline. New positions, staff positions, are generally hard to come by. Not only are they difficult to find, but also to train and to get them acclimated in the organization. And then, of course, the sort of issues of turnover are one that we also have to face as well. Prospects are, in some cases, hurting due to the sort of economic environment. Many of them are, but they also still have loyalty, and we don't want to abuse that loyalty through things like donor fatigue, asking the same donors for the same amounts of money over and over again. Long-term relationships also need to be sustained. We have, in some cases, many of you around the room, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of prospect records. We can't get to every single one of them and give them the same kind of sort of hand-holding and face-to-face contact that we'd like to. And so this process will help us get to more of those prospects in a very short amount of time. So most major gift programs are structured around this idea of portfolios. You have gift officers assigned to prospects. But what do we really know about the composition of those portfolios? We might know number, generally. We might know capacity, essentially, of many of the prospects in that portfolio. But do we know total value, aggregate value of these portfolios across our gift officers, whether it be in higher education, whether it be among other organizations and structures, campuses, units, et cetera. The composition of those portfolios, are they all near-term prospects? Are many of them in sort of a stewardship type phase, and therefore they're longer-term or longer-term cultivation prospects? And what's the likelihood of gifts in the next 18 or 36 months? If you're in the middle of a campaign, do you have any level of certainty that you'll be successful as a gift officer, as a unit, as a campus, whatever the case might be, for securing those gifts that are necessary? And then are there any opportunities for improvement? Can we rebalance portfolios? Can we find processes and means to manage and govern the kind of the ways we spend our time in fundraising? And then do we have any measures of performance and progress? Are we able to report up to institutional leadership, academic leaders, et cetera, about how we're actually doing in getting more out of less? And so comes portfolio analysis. The portfolio analysis process is meant to basically have improved transparency across the entire organization. Everyone knows what we are doing in the Major Gifts program in terms of cultivating and soliciting donors. We want a fact-based way, not intuition, not anecdote, a way something to hang our hats on and say that this is why we've made the choices we've made in deploying our resources for fundraising. And then tools for understanding that. How do we make choices? Is there a piece of software or a report or some sort of meeting or process that can help inform those decisions around deploying resources? Do I need more gift officers in the School of Medicine? Does this gift officer have a light portfolio in the arts? Whatever the case might be. And then being able to feed into other activities like forecasting fundraising results. I think this is critical data, slightly different and maybe not perfectly compatible, but certainly will inform the ways in which we forecast. So what's the concept? The concept is to essentially identify the capacity of both the managed and unmanaged pools across the organization. I realize some of this is 101. Blend this data with the critical prospect management data that you have. Whether you have good prospect management data and everyone's entering everything into the system, or you want to be there. Determining the value of the portfolios across the entire organization, all of the organizational units, if it's a 6-person development shop or it's 105 FTEs across a major academic research institution. And we want to be able to represent this data in a timely way via reports and visualizations so that everyone knows what the score is at any given moment. And then we want to be able to, as I mentioned, make informed decisions. Ultimately, it's about managing the major gift pipeline. It's keeping a sustained cycle of getting to as many donors and touching as many donors as we possibly can. So I gathered a couple of statements from our clients when we've kind of walked them through this process, this exercise that seems daunting. But in hindsight, it actually turned out to be quite simple. And they said things either in the middle or in the beginning of our engagements with them of things like, we have more prospects than we can effectively handle right now. Okay, great, that's good. They feel like the universe is so wide. We've exhausted the opposite. We've exhausted the current pool of major gift prospects. We're done. I don't know how we can do it again in another campaign or whatever the case might be. I need a bulletproof process to make prospect assignments for new gift officers. This is usually from the leadership, the VP or whatever the case might be for you, in that they needed justification. They need to be able to say, well, I'm being fair to you as a gift officer and assigning you these types of prospects in your portfolio. And then are we talking to the best major gift prospects? the idea there is that we don't really know what the true capacity of our prospects are. And then you have the overconfident that feel like we're doing a perfectly good job, and then you realize that there's some opportunities to be taken advantage of. So I'm going to walk you through a series of steps that are essentially in a nutshell versions of what our experience has been with clients going through a process like this. We've really accelerated that timeline for them here, and hopefully this will be helpful to you. The first is to conduct a comprehensive, and the keyword is comprehensive, prospect analysis on all living individuals in your database. And we're going to focus today on individual giving, individual prospects. As a caveat, at the household level, because that is a note to say that there is some level of detail and care with the actual data that we need to consider. We want to be able to do two things by evaluating the sort of capacity of prospects. One is wealth. So you can do this in a number of ways, from very simple and mundane all the way to uber complex. And that's just being able to rate every single prospect in your database with some level of capacity. You could do this with a screening vendor, like GGNA, or with census data, which is a little bit less sophisticated, or with data aggregators and folks that can append data like household income and net worth. Those tend to be lower cost options, but you'd be able to do it across the entire database. The next is a little bit more difficult, which is identifying affinity, strength of relationship, likelihood for making a major gift in the near term. You can do this also a number of ways. There are tons of ways to skin this cat. It can be a profile of major gift donors, people who are of a certain age, who maybe or have a certain set of lifestyle characteristics, have been philanthropic in the past. All of these things we can use. You can also use a service that will model this data. It can be RFM. It can be something that GGNA does, which is to look at all of the variables in your database and look at what's most predictive. Either case, we need these two components to sort of begin. And this also provides for a common vocabulary. This is one of the requirements of this process for it to be successful, is that you use the same evaluation criteria for wealth, for capacity, use the same criteria for measuring affinity. You could say folks that have made at least a $1,000 gift in the past, or folks who are above a certain age. Whatever the criteria is, it has to be the same evaluation for every prospect in your database. And what we've found, and what I think you will as well if you go through this process, is that there are a number of prospects that are assigned to gift officers that just aren't that valuable to us in the near term. They will be prospects who have moderate or lower gift capacity, and they will be newer prospects, meaning they are not ready for a major gift solicitation, and they exist in almost all the portfolios that we've examined across our client base. You'll also find, surprisingly, I still keep looking for a client where there is no opportunity in the database. There are a ton of prospects that we're just not seeing, completely ignoring. And it may not be at the 100,000, 200,000, million plus level, but certainly in the leadership annual giving, the folks that may be at that threshold of becoming or self-identifying as major gift prospects, the 25,000, 10,000 and above level. And this is sort of an example of a very popular, I apologize to the folks in the back who may not be able to see this, very popular visualization of data. Let me set it up a little bit. On the left, you have a measure of gift capacity with gift capacity ranges, kind of a 5-year stretch major gift that could be given to any organization or their top philanthropic priorities. Across the top, you have some measure of affinity. This just so happens to be the GGNA rating for likelihood to make a major gift. We rank ordered them from A through E, A being the best, E being the furthest away from being a near-term major gift prospect. And they each have their own sort of characteristics and things like that. The A's tend to be older. They have given hundreds of thousands of dollars to the organization. The E's tend to be a lot younger. And in this example, we've got 657,000 prospects in the database. It happens to be an advanced database. And we just split it up by those who are assigned to at least one major gift officer or staff member in the organization, and those who do not have such information kept in the donor management system of being assigned, whether today or previously. And what we found were there were almost 1,000 people who fell into the category of less than $25,000 in giving capacity, which could be debated with the method that you used, whether it's a screening vendor or the research team that came up with that rating. But what probably cannot be argued is the level of engagement or participation or how close they are to the institution. In this case, they're D's and E's to us, which means that they have the lowest level of engagement with the institution. And that's well and good. You can have those folks in your portfolios. We're not saying, shed them immediately or anything like that. But certainly when you look at the flip side, which is prospects that have capacity above $100,000, at least electronically, and those who we know fit the profile of other donors in the database, it starts to sort of paint the picture that we might not be as efficient as we think we are. So that in a nutshell was the first step, which is essentially evaluating every prospect in your database. Complementary to that is sort of a side process, which is around prospect management guidelines. So we looked at this amazing sea of unmanaged prospects on the previous page, some 652,000 unmanaged prospects, but almost 2,000 who we think are high value, high priority. But there's a challenge into trying to figure out what to do or how to evenly distribute, or not evenly distribute, but rather distribute those prospects across an organization, large and small. And there are a couple of means or methods to doing that. In a higher education setting, you can look at relationship. You can look at degrees earned. You can look at gift designation, geography, interest areas to create some sort of decision tree or some sort of mechanism to say, based on the characteristics of these prospects that we know, how might we distribute them across portfolios? And so this is a very important step, in some cases time-consuming if you're having challenges internally on how to determine exactly what these rules are. I've seen a prospect management guideline document that was 75 pages that described exactly what happened and which unit or gift officer might even get a particular unmanaged prospect and what the reasons behind that are. And essentially this is a way to tag and to identify prospects that are currently unmanaged to be put into portfolios. This is an example in higher education where we developed just a simple priority mechanism, and I think this can be helpful for those of you who don't have anything like this. Look at the gift designation, the area where they've contributed the most dollars in the last 5 fiscal years, and try and determine, have I been giving to one particular unit versus another, or one department versus another. If you can't make a decision there, let's look lifetime and see maybe there's a tipping point to say that I give either unrestricted dollars or I like to give to a particular designation. In the case of higher education, you might look at the parent status. Where are the children, the students getting their first degree? Athletics, their own preferred school, preferred degree, preferred department, whatever the case might be. And then, of course, just other. So let's put them in a bucket saying we don't know. There's not enough information. The trick is to have buy-in into this, so everyone knows what those guidelines are, and it's sort of undisputed. If it is disputed, there's some sort of mechanism for saying, I'd like this person in my portfolio as a gift officer. And then you get to produce the same chart by any particular unit or function within the development office. I'm just showing an example of business and medicine. I'm going to talk about some of the details on this chart later, but I just wanted to highlight, once you've accomplished that process of being able to distribute these prospects potentially by their interest areas, you can start to compare units, gift officers, campuses, that kind of thing, by the number of prospects that are low priority, those that they might consider shedding from their portfolios, and the tremendous opportunity that may exist among that pool. And really, this should essentially paint the picture of where staff might be allocated. And I know the portfolio values and the adjusted values are very interesting, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. So what did we do in step one? We sort of focused on confirming those unassigned high-value prospects. In many cases, these can be narrowed further into manageable chunks for research staff, gift officers, whatever the case might be, and really start to validate them and put them into a qualification kind of stage. You may decide to delay the kind of decisions that you make around new staff deployment. At this stage, I don't think you have necessarily enough information to make those critical decisions until you start to review the actual composition of the gift officer portfolios and really start to shed or make drastic changes in the composition of their portfolios. You might want to, at this stage, also review what your current process or policy is around staging prospects. I'm assuming everyone here understands the concept of stages whereby you're essentially assigning these prospects into a solicitation cycle phase. It may be early cultivation or even identification. It might be you're closing a gift with the prospect, or all the way to the end of a solicitation stage where they may be held for a period of time. And then, of course, determine whether any changes need to be made to the database to house all of this great information that you are now compiling on your prospects. Step two is the actual portfolio review process. This is where we start to dive deep. Now that we've done an evaluation of the database, now that we've blended it with the prospect management data, we want to create an aggregate value for the portfolios. And the easiest way to do that is to essentially do a calculation crude called, could versus would. Capacity times inclination. And at GGNA, we start with our clients with a very simple calculation. A prospect who's very close to the organization is going to have 100% of their capacity potentially valued for that portfolio. Someone who is very new, a prospect who's very new to the organization, low engagement, might be 0 as a multiplier for their capacity. And it really doesn't matter what you use. You can be very scientific about this and get down to the decimal and try and really evaluate what the prospect could give. But it's not about that specific value. It's about the relative value to other gift officer portfolios. And what you come up with in this example is, I've got a list of gift officer names on the left. I assume this is a very geeky room, so I've got Star Trek characters and Hunger Games characters on the left here. Not only do we know the number of prospects in those portfolios, but now we have what we call a sum-adjusted portfolio value. That's basically taking all of the capacity estimates of all the prospects in the database, multiplying it by a coefficient in a sense, and then coming up with an aggregate total for those portfolios. We created something called an index to say, what's the average value of a portfolio across this organization? In this organization, it happened to be 7.6 million. And again, the number itself doesn't matter. It's just to say that on average, that's what the calculation says for this group of gift officers, whether it's at the unit level or overall. And then an average value per prospect in the portfolio. We have indexes for those as well. And then finally, the last two columns measure how many or what proportion or distribution of the prospects in the portfolio are close to a major gift. A through C being very close, D through E being very essentially further away. Some portfolios have 80% of their portfolio being near-term major gift prospects, and they're doing about 20% of identification and qualification work. In other cases, it's completely flipped. And what's the optimal distribution or proportion of that among your gift officers? I think it's going to vary by the type of gift officer, the experience and tenure of the gift officer, and their role within the organization. And so I'm highlighting a few cases here. Katniss Everdeen. She's got 16 prospects in her portfolio, clearly the most valuable portfolio at this example institution with $35 million of value. Each of the prospects are worth over $2 million using this sort of calculation. And then compare that with some of these other portfolios. If you look at Caesar Flickerman, and this is this example here, and the last example, they both have approximately 86 prospects in their portfolio, but Caesar Flickerman's portfolio is valued at almost 8 times the size of Alex Rozhenko here at the bottom. And so clearly, they're managing the same number of prospects, they're making the same number of visits in theory to these gift offs, to these prospects. But certainly the value of their portfolio is not as strong. A couple of other notes at the top, which are being blocked a little bit. What's optimal in terms of portfolio sizes across a full-time FTE? We've seen in many of our client organizations that it ranges from 90 to 600. There are actually 600 prospects in a particular portfolio. Some of these organizations would surprise you as well in terms of who they are. Yet we can only essentially visit about 6 to 12 prospects per month. So maybe that's 120 visits that we can make in a single year. So is the number of prospects in a portfolio really optimal at 150, 125? Those things have been thrown around at conferences. Maybe not. We have evidence to suggest that what might be optimal might be 75 or 80 prospects in a full-time major gift officer's portfolio where they're spending 90% of their time working with prospects. And so this data can really help you take care of Gail Hawthorne, who's hogging quite a bit of prospects with $31.7 million worth of value in there. And then again, being able to see this at the unit level. In many units, you'll have the top fundraiser, the alpha dog there, raising a tremendous amount of money and having one of the strongest portfolios. But what can we do about the other peers within those units? Can we align their portfolios and distribute all of that opportunity that we identified during the prospect analysis phase of this, and get them to have a similar portfolio as the top director of development? So some of the actions in this step, where you're actually looking at individual portfolios. Clean up inaccurate or outdated prospect assignments. I think everyone in this room can say that those of you who do have a portfolio management structure will find that there are a ton of prospects. I handed a gift officer their portfolio once, and he or she said, that shouldn't be in there. Well, it is. It's in the system, it is. Evaluate the assignments against the FTE status, as I mentioned. Clearly, somebody having a 600 or 1,000 person portfolio is not a best practice or not effective. And then consider, no matter how difficult it is, releasing some of these prospects into other gift officers or to the annual giving prospect pool, even if they give you that recurring $10,000 gift every year after one phone call. So. Step 3 is another preparation exercise. It's this staging exercise again. And whether it's reviewing or developing from scratch some definition of prospect stages and criteria for being in those stages needs to be done. So if you're very sophisticated, I'd urge you to take another look at it. If you are just starting, this is great because you get to plan it from scratch and it's a total greenfield from there. Generally, they should have these following 4 categories. You can sort of tailor this a little bit based on the culture of your institution, but there's sort of an identification, qualification stage, a cultivation stage, solicitation, meaning you're closing the gift or about to close the gift, and then stewardship, whether it be short-term. Some of our client organizations will have a long-term stewardship stage, whereby clearly they've made a principal gift of a very enormous number and they're unlikely to re-enter this cycle of prospect management. This you'll really be upset with me about because some of the font is very small, but I'll read this to you. This is an example of a 6-stage model, starting with identification and qualification and ending in stewardship. The 2 different ones are early cultivation versus advanced cultivation, and then a differentiation between a proposal stage and a closing stage. I think the most important thing are not the actual stages, but of course the definition and the time limit to be in these stages. And also what justifies their exit from a particular stage or their movement from one stage to the other. So in this example, the institution that we worked with had actually developed time limits to be in this stage. It is 12 months essentially enough time to be able to say whether they should move from an early cultivation phase to an advanced cultivation phase. And it really allows us to, by setting these timelines, push the progress with these gift officers along instead of having them stay in a particular stage like stewardship for 10 years. And then the definitions just need to be very tight and accepted widely. I'll give you an example of a stage, the third stage in this example, which is called advanced cultivation. I'm just going to verbatim read the definition. The prospects involved at expanded levels, meaning a ton of face-to-face contacts, relationships with key staffs, volunteers, et cetera, and they're being positioned essentially for a major gift solicitation. The manager is working to refine the proposals related to the prospect interests, and we plan to actually make that proposal within the next 6 to 12 months. So if none of those are true, then essentially this prospect shouldn't be in this stage. What does it mean to be able to move forward in this stage? It basically means when a manager determines that the prospective donor is ready to respond to this gift proposal. And if that's not the case, they can either re-enter this whole cycle by being back to early cultivation, or they might be released to leadership annual giving. And then the timing on this, as I mentioned, is a reasonable amount of time that has been accepted by this organization as an example of 6 to 12 months for being in this stage. So at the 6-month, 8-month, 12-month time frame, you need to make some choices. Okay, so what have we done in this time frame? We've essentially refined the definition of the prospect stages and the criteria for being in those stages and have really tightened that up. In this case, it's going to be across the entire organization, the gift officers, the leadership team, et cetera, through a variety of workshops. We have had experience doing this in about 60 to 90 days across our client institutions. And then, of course, work with IT, research, prospect management to make sure that everyone understands these codes and that there is a mechanism for capturing them in the database. One level of detail that I'm kind of blowing completely over is sort of a proposal level stage. Right now we're really talking about an overall stage. If I have, I'm identifying a prospect for a particular unit, but I'm also close to making a proposal to another, we're talking about an overall stage which is the closest to action. And that will give you this kind of view that we're trying to achieve here. Step 4 then takes all of the prep work that you've done in the stages analysis or stages definition, and we are actually going to look at that relative to inclination ratings and the capacity estimates. We're going to give those to gift officers, and we're actually going to give them some sort of homework. This is in the event that the stage data is a mess. I've done screening with a lot of clients, and I ask them for the stage data just for the sake of being able to display it in the report, and they said, you don't want to trust that data. Well, this is a perfect and prime opportunity. It might seem like a daunting task, but we gave gift officers 6 weeks at a client institution to have every gift officer reevaluate their portfolio and, as a one-time thing, stage them into the appropriate portfolio. They can't go on and do this forever. But at the particular homework assignment, they were able to do that and get all of that data back into the system. At this stage, you should then essentially present them with a report of where their prospects are in each stage. This is what I'm showing you here. This is an institution-wide view where, not surprisingly, a lot of their prospects are in the cultivation stage. 45% of them are, almost a quarter are in the sort of stewardship stage. But then when you look at it from a capacity standpoint, not just sheer number of prospects, well more than a third of their prospects are in stewardship. So depending on where you are in sort of your fundraising efforts, you might be in the middle of a campaign, at the tail end, or at the beginning of a campaign. This can look very different and may be contrary to what you would expect based on where you are in that timeline. And then, of course, by gift officer, by unit, by any organizational structure, you can then look at where the prospects are at this stage level. Some of these prospects, Unit I, for example, they're soliciting. Their proposals are flying out the door. You'll look at Unit S, where a lot of their prospects are still in cultivation, or even Unit P, where a lot of their prospects are still in the identification stage. So depending on what the expectations are for those units, the data may not suggest that they'll be successful, or may suggest that they're going to be successful in that particular effort. And then finally, probably the most difficult thing to produce is sort of an analysis of the movement. And this is what I'm talking about relative to transparency and making sure we measure our progress. This is a report that shows how the prospects have moved in and out of the stages over a 6-month period. And it's going to vary by the time limits that you've given for each of these stages. But you'll see at the end of July in a particular year, there were 10 prospects worth $1.6 million in the stage 4 or cleared to solicit prospect stage. By August 31st, we had actually moved 1 prospect out of that stage and had 3 more prospects move in. So for a total balance of 12 prospects in that particular stage. And that should remain essentially consistent or around that same range of between 9 and 12 throughout the year or on an ongoing basis. So this is a great report that I think you'd want to share with management to say this is how well and how effective we're moving new major gift prospects through the pipeline. I have like 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to say that we want to essentially distribute the unmanaged. Oh, 15, okay, sorry. Distribute the unassigned priority prospects to the gift officers at this point, because now you know that they have capacity in the identification stage to begin qualifying and identifying prospects, or not. They may be doing a ton of identification work, and so new prospects into their portfolio is probably not a good idea. You want to make these management reports available to everyone across the entire organization and across the structure. And then, of course, build that time and stage report that I showed you just now. So outcomes. Will we raise more money by employing this very complex and strict method of managing prospects in our portfolios? I think that's yet to be seen. But what we can determine at least are the following. One is that this data is widely available. You now have complete transparency across the organization in terms of who's managing what and what stage they're in. There are rules essentially for everything. You have buy-in from the academic leadership in the case of higher education, as in deans. You have buy-in from the gift officers, the senior leadership team, advancement services, et cetera. And you have better management. You have something to talk about at these prospect meetings. You have materials, collateral to give to them and say, this is what the data is showing. So I think it makes that effort much more valuable and productive. And then back to this whole nebulous universe thing, you've really narrowed the universe. Now you know what you have to bite off, so to speak. And then lastly, for those of you who would engage in an external organization like GGNA doing this analysis, you have a fact-based analysis with external validation. You don't have to navigate that political minefield of who came up with these ratings, who developed these guidelines, et cetera. You can hang your hat on sort of that level of external validation. And then in terms of impact, this I can actually share with you. This is from Yale University. It's in a webinar that we gave when we did the same process with them, and we have since done over 50 of these across a number of organizations, large and small. They had 9,700 prospects assigned to their major gift staff, $1.6 billion in total value, at least the way that we assessed it. And then each prospect was on average about $165,000 prospect. There were 3,200 prospects who we deemed as low priority, meaning ones that should essentially not be in gift officer portfolios, at least at this stage, representing only a meager $9.4 million in aggregate value. And then each prospect was valued at about $3,000. So if we subtract that number, we're at 6,500 prospects. We've lowered the overall value of the pool we're managing, but we've increased the average value of the prospects to 243,000. That's the middle number there on the right. And then if we add in the 1,500 prospects that we deemed as high priority that were unmanaged, with an average, total prospect value of almost 120 million, and $77,000 in average prospect value, we actually net, after all of that, fewer prospects being managed, 1,500 fewer prospects being actively managed, with a greater total prospect value at 1.7 billion. And then the average prospect value has gone up to 211,000. So this is what, and when Yale engaged us to do this study, they were actually about to finish the campaign. So I think it does not essentially matter at what stage you do this. It can certainly have near-term effects. I'm going to open it up for questions. Yep.
I'm kind of curious about that timeline that you showed with the new, moved, and balanced by stage. Could you explain again what the
Sure.
difference is between those two?
So yeah, it is a complicated chart, and actually when I developed it, I was like, do I even understand? So these are essentially 6-month timeframes, July, August, I'm sorry, monthly timeframes each month. And what we're, for a total of 6 months. And what we're saying is that at each review, at the end of each month, we had 10, 12, 13, 11, 9, 10 prospects in that particular stage. Now, at some point, their time limit for being in the stage is going to expire, whether it's organic or forced. And we need to make a decision about what to do with that particular prospect. Do we advance them to the next stage? Are we going to ask them for, are we going to put a proposal in front of them? Or are we going to go back a stage and start over with trying to identify what the donor interests are, where we might match them up with a particular a purpose? Or do we release them to annual giving? And so that move number is what measures how many are actually, they can't stay in that stage, so they have to go somewhere. In terms of the new, that would be those prospects coming from stage 3 or the prior stage, in that something has happened to suggest that they move on to this stage called cleared to solicit, meaning some activity has been done to get them to that stage. Does that make sense? And so the idea is to be able to look at this report and for it to make sense that you don't have 600, all of your prospects in stage 4, and there's some distribution. As a firm, we can't make a recommendation on what the distribution of the prospects by. It's going to be different over a number of factors, whether or not you are in a campaign in any sort of focused fundraising effort, what kind of gift officer you are, and how tenured you might be are probably the 3 most popular. Yes?
Who's doing the data entry on all this information?
Which part? The stages data or the?
All of the data that is going in, that would be coming from the minds of the field staff, or are they doing the entry as an admin person?
In the event of the stage data where we gave them homework, in all of the cases that we've done this, we've given them Excel spreadsheets with ID numbers, and they would input one of 6 stages into that category. And then all of those Excel spreadsheets were combined together and joined to the advanced database with the entity ID. On an ongoing basis, they have to actually use the prospect management system, go into that particular prospect and move them along. Some of you might have triggers for that if a proposal has been, yeah.
Our stage process is completely automated.
Completely automated.
And it all depends on various tasks, from identifying, qualifying, through cultivation, and then it switches over to proposals. And it goes through the proposals into stewardship, and then actually revisiting.
Great.
And based on time, and like qualifying a proposal, qualifying a prospect, you get 90 days. And if you don't have contact with them, or it's actually attempted contact even, then they drop out.
Yeah.
They go back into identified. We don't allow anyone to make stage. They can go in, and if they were to manually modify the stage,
right.
morning backwards.
Yeah, that would be optimal, and I think that that saves a ton of time, presuming that it's right.
The hard way.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
From your experience, when it comes to portfolio management, and you're determining who's assigned to which gift officer, how do you deal with gift officers who are so reluctant to release folks in their previous portfolio?
I think that's a lot of the expectation setting that a lot of the prep work that you make when you undergo this process. I think this is a catalyst. If you have an external organization coming in, this is a catalyst to say that we are going to change this system, and the old ways are not going to fly. But I agree, it's a difficult conversation to be had in a lot of cases. But they really need to justify why the prospect needs to be in their portfolio. And if there's a process to say, okay, if given this set of criteria, an exception clause, right. Some way to say, well, you can develop what that criteria can be. Yes. Yes. Yep.
It's actually, it's kind of a follow-up on that, more of a response than a question, but, what I've found is that when gift officers are reluctant to give up prospects, in most cases, it's because, in part at least, the development office doesn't have a well-established leadership annual giving special gifts or stewardship program. So that if they give up those prospects, they're not going to have anywhere to go to.
Right.
So they feel like they're just going to be left in the dark. So
Yeah.
sometimes I think having those other things in place and really looking at that can help with getting rid of people out there.
And it might even be peer pressure. You've got similar gift officers within their own units or across the organization that are also beholden to those criteria for keeping these prospects. So why do you get to keep this parking pass donor, and I don't get to, or whatever the case may
We
be?
do have an 8-month policy. If there's no contacts being made in that prospect anywhere, like a tracking or a contact report, then we move them out. It's research makes the decision.
It's forced. Okay.
Yeah, because we manage portfolios and we have
Great.
to fill everybody's portfolios.
Right.
They don't get to make the decision.
Yeah. So there's a lot of variation across the organizations, but I think we all kind of know what's obviously optimal, and then you have turnover and you have to retrain, reteach, Anything else? Thank you very much.